Kathleen Dustin is one of the pioneering artists in polymer clay in terms of using it as an art medium, and you better believe it when I tell you that she's right behind me. Hello, Kathleen.
Well, hello.
This is such a great honor. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
You're welcome.
So I have a couple of questions that I'm sure you're dying to hear about, so let's begin. When you started working with polymer clay, there was no internet, not many books about it. Do you think that your background in ceramics actually helped you explore this medium?
Definitely. It definitely helped because I like working with a material that is very malleable. And so moving from ceramic clay to polymer clay was very easy. Actually, I found it when my daughter was just a toddler and we were living in Saudi Arabia, and I went to a children's store with her and saw Fimo in the children's store, and I thought, you like a bake in the oven? So I found Fimo in the children's store, and I thought, this might be fun. Because I'd already worked in ceramics, but not in Saudi Arabia. I couldn't bring ceramic clay with me in a kiln and all that. So I picked some up and I made some Christmas ornaments. And then when we moved back to the United States, this was in 1984, 85, 40 years ago, I was using it more, and I saw a necklace by a woman named Pierre Volkas, who was one of the two people who started making jewelry with it. And she was doing very simple designs, wrapping clay one color around another and molding round beads. But it was like, wow, what a concept! And so I started making some beads also, and just figuring out how to twist colors and cut them off and make lemon beads. And the rest is history. Well, I should say then a few years later we moved to Turkey. This is all because of my husband's job. We moved to Ankara, Turkey, and I brought polymer clay with me, a whole bunch of it. When we moved back to the United States 4 years later, I never went back to ceramics.
Oh, so essentially polymer clay made you abandon ceramics.
It did.
I guess it makes sense because, first of all, it's more portable. You're not going to carry the kiln if you're relocating, and also the use of the colors, because with ceramics it's just white, isn't it?
Or gray, yes, while you're making it. And in fact, it's the color. Because I was sculpting color in my hands instead of adding it on later like a glaze, I could get extremely detailed. This part's funny. In the United States, in the late 80s, 1980s, there were a handful of us working with polymer clay and figuring out millefiori on our own. We all thought we invented it. And we all did on our own. And then I wrote an article for an art magazine about polymer clay, and everybody came out of the woodwork. So to speak, I use this too, and I make this too, and we all found each other.
That's brilliant.
It was really amazing. It was because of this magazine article, which was a national magazine, that really brought us all together.
So actually, it would be quite safe to say that you began curating community with the artists that you found that way.
Yes, in a way, yeah. And I have a studio in an art center outside of Washington, D.C. And I started bringing polymer and rolling beads, and other artists saw what I was doing. What is that? And so they insisted I teach a class and just introduce them to it. And one of the first students was Nan Roche, who wrote the book, The New Clay, that was the first book in 1990. So when I started and these other people started, there were no books. We didn't know about a pasta machine. We didn't have slicing blades. I mean, all of this was kind of found out and figured out as time went on. And a lot went on with polymer clay in the United States, but I would say now Europe is doing much more interesting, inventive things with polymer than the United States. Yeah.
But it's all thanks to you and other fellow artists at the time, and I'm so grateful that you began teaching your beads back then, which led us to this date when you're actually teaching workshops on your handbags. So could you tell us more about your handbags?
Yes, I think it was my background in ceramics, making vessels, that it was actually one of those epiphanies in the middle of the night. I woke up and I thought, a handbag. I could make a personal vessel, and this is perfect for it because it's lightweight, it's waterproof, it's full of color, and unlike regular ceramics, it's somewhat flexible. I can drop this on a floor and it's not going to break.
And I can attest to that because Kathleen actually did drop it multiple times to make a scene, and all of us went, and actually the handbag survived, and
That's right.
It didn't crack or anything. It's so incredibly flexible and durable.
It is. And in fact, so the way I've made a living now for 40 years is by selling my work at the best fine craft shows in the United States. And these are juried shows that, like the Smithsonian Museum has one, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Anyway, at one of these shows, a gentleman backed up against the wall of my booth. My whole booth fell over. All of my purses, and everyone's thinking, oh my gosh. I just picked them all up, put the walls back up and put the purses back up.
Really good for advertising, actually.
Yes, it was. And what's funny is he was very upset, and I think he probably thought I would sue him. I thought he would sue me for falling down in my booth, but we were both just fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad that it was a happy ending for this story.
Yes.
And so when I met you in Czech Republic in Polymer Week in 2023, I saw two other handbags that you had. One of them was shaped like a female body, and the other one was shaped like a flower. And what actually stuck with me after you made this speech at the opening ceremony was a quote that you said. You said something along the lines of, you do not wish to be inspired by nature because everyone's inspired by nature. However, the nature creeps into your art, or it essentially got into your art eventually. So I was wondering, did you start out making abstract art and then nature creeps into your work afterwards? Because your studio is in the middle of the forest with a nice scenery, so I thought it would be very difficult not to get inspired by your surroundings.
Yes. Well, actually, we always lived in big cities, including when we lived overseas. So my first purses, I do work in series. My first series had faces, women's faces on them. And it was because I was interested in art history and like Renaissance faces, and I drew them. They're not photocopies. And I drew face. My daughters also are there. Of course, my daughters are beautiful. Everyone's daughters are. And so I would draw them as well onto the polymer. Then we moved to the forest. And I thought, I really liked living in the city and having everything available. Will it be isolating in the forest? Took about a year to adjust, but now I love it there. It is so dark at night. There are no lights. It is so quiet. You can only hear animals. Anyway, it was when I moved to the forest that, yes, nature got me around the neck. And okay, all right, because I saw this wonderful little dry pod on the ground when I was taking a walk. And I looked at, oh, what a great shape for a purse. And so that's how I started. And flower buds, and like this it's a rock, and I actually found a rock and to wrap clay around. And then we live near an apple orchard, and it has beautiful apples. And so I liked the juxtaposition of the rough rock surface and then the shiny, juicy apple. And it's all polymer clay, which is pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing material. It can look like anything.
Yeah, and you're probably wondering how heavy these are. And honestly, it looks like a rock, but it weighs almost nothing.
Yes.
It's so light.
Yes. Then after we lived in the woods, my living overseas started coming back to me because I loved studying the material culture, the way women dress, the carpets they make, and just all the patterns and textures of where I had lived. Plus I have it all hanging in my house. So I started this series, which is silk. It's called my Silk Road series. And so, it's a little looser. It has lots of patterns and textures that take a very long time to put in, all by hand. And so I've done this series now for, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years. And I'm ready to move on to another series. I just haven't figured out yet what it will be.
Whatever it will be, I'm sure it's going to be amazing, and we're looking forward to seeing that already. But it's very interesting how the abstract came into your work afterwards. But there are a lot of artists out there, when you look at their work, you can instantly recognize them based on the colors that they're using because they have their signature color palette. Whereas looking at your work, it's very evident that you don't shy away from color. Your Silk Road work has all the colors of the rainbow. So I was wondering, how do you determine what color you're going to pick for your next project?
Well, one thing is I do not use the colors straight from the package. I always mix colors, always. And I try to mute the colors a little because sometimes polymer clay has such bright, beautiful colors. They can get a little too, what's the word? Seduce me. They can seduce me. So I try to mute them and make them, because real life is not glow-in-the-dark colors all the time. And then my color palette is, so it's a warmer. I want it, like this one in particular, to look a little more aged, have some, like this was made 150 years ago instead of just recently. And, I have an MFA Master of Fine Arts degree in ceramics, and I had to take, color theory and painting. So I'm pretty confident with the color choices I make. I don't know, it just happens. I don't think too much about the colors when I start. I kind of react to, I put a color on, like, okay, what would be a good contrast? Then kind of think about it as I go.
And I also have a slight controversial question in our community. People always argue about what's the best polymer clay brand out there, and do you have a favorite?
No. For me, whatever you use should work for the purpose you have. And for example, this is Primo, made in the United States. I have found that it's flexible, but not too flexible. And I mean, it holds its shape well. It also is very strong when you cure it properly. And I love the gold color that Primo comes in, because I make the insides of my bags gold so that you can see what's in there instead of them being black, which, okay, black kind of, it doesn't show the dirt, but it's so much more lovely to open it and see it glow. So I love the Primo Gold, and I use Fimo also and Cernet. They all bake roughly at the same temperature. I use Kato occasionally if I want a real stiff.
Me too.
Because I want these a little flexible, I don't use Kato for the purses, but I could. But Kato bakes cures at a higher temperature. So it's more what the purpose is. I think they're all fine, and I intermix them too. I'll mix some Cernet with Primo, and it's fine.
I agree with you. They're all intermixed. That's what I do as well. But have you ever tried the Cos clay, the most flexible clay on the market?
I just got a free sample at Polymer Week 24. I haven't tried it yet because I got one bar. I want a couple of colors,
Yeah.
but I would love to try it.
So that's your experimental.
Yes.
Maybe your next handbag series could incorporate some of your properties. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see.
Right.
And I have noticed lately that so many people took up polymer clay as a hobby during pandemic. However, I feel that the generation that started working with polymer clay at that time are extremely focused on using cutters, and they buy tons of cutters, and then they create thousands of the same shape and get bored of the craft very easily. In my opinion, cutters limit your creativity if that's the way you look at them, if that's the purpose of them. So I wondered, have you ever used cutters, and do you like them, or do you just prefer creating your own molds and create everything from scratch?
I do pretty much create everything from scratch. I actually have a cutter that it's a spiral shape that I asked someone to make for me. But you're right, I prefer to cut my own shapes, even an oval, because I want the hand to show. So it's a little bit off. That's okay, the hand made it, a machine didn't make it. And all of these other shapes are too perfect. I like it to be not too perfect. I want people to see, oh, somebody made this. And I can see that somebody made this because the little marks aren't perfect. And it's far more interesting and far more absorbing for people to see the work of the hand. And it's like, no wonder they get bored. Well, not only that, I find that many polymer workers, because it's sort of a hobby material, they don't put themselves into it. They make what they think is pretty. They see it on Instagram or Facebook, and it's, oh, I want to make those pretty earrings. And they get the cutters and they get the collars, and okay, great. But if you make 100 pair of those, it gets pretty boring, that's true. I prefer to make my work personal. Like I said with my series, it's from my life, it's from me paying attention to what's around me, to other people. That's not to say I'm not influenced by a shape, but often I'll look at the shape of the roof of a car instead of a shape of a cutter. Or like the way the windows in the car reflect, that could be kind of cool. So paying attention in that way to your life, to the lives of other people, to what you see on the street or in the forest. That's because people ask me all the time, where do you get your ideas? I pay attention. And it's hard work. It's hard to pay attention. But not only does my work sell better because people know my work, but I am more satisfied with it. And, I've spent 40 years making and selling handbags and jewelry. I don't regret it at all. It was hard sometimes. But what is it? There's a saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Or you just work non-stop.
True. When you work for yourself, I have spent many a 60-hour week working. So it's a little bit of an addiction in that way.
It's a good addiction to have. And obviously, because you spend so much time working with Polymer Clay, you briefly mentioned earlier that you have industrial bakery rollers for rolling pizza dough. And you also, so essentially it's this size, isn't it?
Oh,
your
yeah,
rollers.
Yes, the rollers are that wide.
And you have a large oven as well. Is there anything else that you would like to highlight as your favorite tool in your studio that helps you work with the clay?
Nice. Probably just a scalpel for cutting. I use it all the time. With brand new blades, I have a whole package of blades, and if it's I would take it out, throw it away, and put in a new blade. I use lots of blades.
I guess because I feel that because you were there from the beginning of using polymer clay as an art medium, you learn how to use clay without lots of fancy tools and with a lot of household items instead, so you don't feel the same temptation that people feel nowadays when they go on Instagram and they see a tool that does only one specific thing and they think, oh my god, I do that process, I need that tool, whereas
Yes.
you think that you'll have a workaround for it, you'll just do it manually.
Right, or I make my own tools. I have made many a tool from polymer clay, from wood, something like that. Speaking of seeing what you see on Instagram or new things, I'm going to say something here that I want everyone to listen to. I hate UV resin. It makes it look so beautiful, and there's so much depth, and it looks cheap. And in 10 years, it'll start turning yellow. In 20 years, it'll be way yellow. In 30, which you might think, 30 years, who cares? This one's probably 20 years old. Wow. It's so impermanent. It looks cheap. I mean, there are other ways to get that kind of a surface. I have a thing called a translucent layering technique.
Mhm.
Anyway, don't use UV resin. I'm sorry, but I have to say that.
No, I agree. I've dabbled into resin craft myself, and it yellowed after being in the sun for half an hour. So it really depends on which resin you use. Some of them say that they have anti-yellowing qualities in the resin, but it will still yellow. It will just yellow later
Yes.
in life. So it's only a short-term fix for. It's a short-term fix essentially, but because polymer clay is a type of plastic after all, you do want to create something long-lasting. You don't want to add to a fast fashion industry.
Right, exactly. And I have to say, I made something out of red Prima, I think it was, like 30 years ago, and kept it outside in the sun just to see what would happen. It did not lose its color. And red is one of the more stable colors because they claimed they put some sort of UV retardant in it, and it worked. And this purse is, like I said, probably 20 years old, and that's still the same red.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And this was brilliant. And are you planning any future workshops?
Yes, when people invite me, I don't actually go out looking for workshops.
So essentially, if you do want to join a workshop with Kathleen, keep an eye out on Instagram and Facebook and on social media accounts, and you might just be lucky one day and attend one of them.
Yes.